In May 2014, Janelle Simmons felt completely immersed in her isolated routine. Her job had become her main focus. For more than 10 years, she had worked for the Denver Police Department, earning a solid reputation as a dependable and disciplined officer. Her coworkers knew she would always go the extra mile, whether that meant staying late or coming in on weekends. Her work ethic was impeccable, yet her personal life lacked any meaningful connections. Janelle seldom kept up with anyone outside of the job, and her life appeared to follow a routine that never changed. But in May, things started to shift. The department assigned her a new partner, LaKeisha Montgomery, a 28-year-old vibrant officer who had quickly made a name for herself as sharp and driven. Known for her charisma and outgoing personality, LaKeisha stood out with her warm and approachable demeanor. Despite LaKeisha's friendly exterior, she was also highly ambitious, driven by her goal to rise through the ranks, something Janelle respected. While their relationship initially remained strictly professional, LaKeisha slowly became the person who began breaking through Janelle's personal barriers. In June, hoping to build a stronger bond, LaKeisha invited Janelle to her home for dinner. The invitation was casual, meant to give them a chance to talk about life beyond the job over a shared meal. LaKeisha had recently moved into a new home with her husband, Kevon, a 36-year-old specialist working for a local cybersecurity company. At work, LaKeisha often spoke about Kevon, praising how supportive he had been, especially during the more challenging moments in their relationship. At first, Janelle hesitated, unsure if she should accept the invitation, as she had always valued her personal boundaries. But her desire to connect with her partner and avoid appearing aloof outweighed her doubts. That evening, she decided to go to LaKeisha's house. On June 20th, 2014, Janelle arrived at LaKeisha and Kevon's home in a peaceful Denver suburb. The cozy two-story house was framed by a neatly kept garden. Inside, the atmosphere felt welcoming and homey, with soft colors decorating the space, family photos lining the walls, and gentle music playing in the background. The evening started off casually, with light conversation about work and the challenges of staying calm in difficult moments. LaKeisha was an excellent hostess, effortlessly keeping the mood light with jokes and an easygoing attitude. But when Kevon, their son, entered the room, the atmosphere subtly changed. Janelle hadn't anticipated much from meeting LaKeisha's husband, but an unexpected tension filled the air between her and Kevon. They exchanged the usual pleasantries, yet Janelle caught herself holding her gaze on him for longer than she intended. On the surface, Kevon seemed calm and self-assured, with a deep, pleasant voice and a gentle smile. Yet there was something more to Kevon that caught Janelle's attention and made her feel uneasy. As the evening wore on, their conversation shifted away from mundane topics, and Janelle found herself increasingly drawn to Kevon. He wasn't just a colleague's husband, but an engaging conversationalist who truly knew how to listen. He appeared more composed and centered than LaKeisha, with a subtle sense of humor and a keen gaze. Whenever LaKeisha stepped away to the kitchen or other tasks, the silence that settled between Janelle and Kevon grew thick, with an undeniable tension that Janelle couldn't overlook. Janelle found herself inexplicably drawn to him, a feeling she couldn't quite control. During one of the times when LaKeisha left them alone, it seemed Kevon felt the pull too. Their conversations took on a more intimate tone, delving into personal topics indirectly, through subtle hints and suggestions. As the evening drew to a close and Janelle bid farewell to the Montgomerys, she felt as though she was teetering on the brink of something both risky and thrilling. Kevon lingered in her thoughts, and she found herself repeatedly replaying their exchanges and the charged glances they shared. It wasn't just casual conversation, and Janelle recognized that. But what could she do? LaKeisha was her partner, her colleague, and someone with whom she had established a strong professional connection. The encounter with Kevon had unsettled her, leaving her in internal conflict. As she drove home, Janelle understood that something significant had shifted in her life that evening. By the summer of 2014, Janelle found herself reflecting more on her past. The situation with Kevon had stirred up emotions she had long buried. Her thoughts turned to her father, a steadfast police officer who had always been a formidable role model in her life. That pivotal day when her father died in the line of duty turned Janelle's world upside down. She was just 10 years old, and her memories are haunted by the blaring sirens and her mother's tears, who never fully recovered from the tragedy. This tragedy had driven Janelle to pursue success in law enforcement, hoping her work would fill the void left by her father's absence. Now, over 20 years later, she realized that her job no longer offered the emotional solace she had sought. Her connection with Kevon felt like something new, a potential source of comfort that might help her address the emptiness she had been grappling with for so long. In Kevon's company, Janelle found the support, understanding, and care she had been missing. By August 2014, the dynamic in LaKeisha and Kevon's home started to shift. LaKeisha was increasingly absorbed in her work, diving into her cases and increasingly avoiding the issues that were straining her marriage. The strain in their relationship stemmed from the loss of their child the previous year. It had been their first child, and the tragedy deeply affected their marriage. Kevon had withdrawn from LaKeisha while she immersed herself in her career to try to numb the pain. This created an emotional rift between them that neither could bridge. Feeling increasingly distant from LaKeisha, Kevon began seeking comfort outside his marriage. At this point, Janelle became the person with whom he could share his feelings and experiences. While LaKeisha was not opening up to Kevon, Janelle was attentive and caring. LaKeisha began to notice her husband's growing withdrawal, but she attributed it to the lingering effects of their tragedy. Her suspicions grew, but she carefully concealed them behind a facade of indifference to prevent worsening the situation. By September 2014, Janelle and Kevon's work-related meetings became more frequent. Under the guise of collaborating on police cases, they found themselves spending increasing amounts of time together. Their conversations slowly transitioned from work-related topics to more personal matters. Initially, they talked about their cases, but over time their discussions grew more intimate. Kevon began confiding in Janelle about his marital issues, the strain with LaKeisha, and his growing feelings of isolation. In response, Janelle opened up about her past and her struggles to balance her professional and personal life. As their conversations deepened, their emotional connection grew stronger. Janelle felt she was becoming someone Kevon could rely on, while Kevon saw in Janelle a person who truly understood and supported him. They started meeting more often, coming up with new reasons to spend time together. By early October 2014, Janelle and Kevon began seeing each other not just at work but outside of it as well. A pivotal moment in their relationship occurred on October 4th, when they decided to meet at a cafe to discuss a case. That evening proved to be casual, with their conversation drifting away from professional topics. For the first time, Kevon confided in Janelle, revealing that he was contemplating ending his marriage with LaKeisha. He expressed his belief that their relationship was beyond repair. Kevon's words hit Janelle profoundly. She realized she was becoming increasingly entangled in his life and acknowledged that their connection had grown beyond simple friendship. She couldn't ignore that her feelings for him were evolving into something deeper. That evening, they left the cafe with the clear understanding that their relationship had transcended friendship. It had become an emotional affair, fraught with the potential for something far more perilous. Throughout October 2014, Janelle and Kevon seized every opportunity to meet. Official meetings and case discussions became mere pretexts for their growing emotional closeness. They found themselves communicating more with each other than with anyone else. Every time Janelle saw Kevon, her heart raced with anticipation. Kevon realized he was increasingly drawn to Janelle, seeing her as more than just his wife's colleague. As LaKeisha continued to sense the growing distance in their marriage, she chose to ignore it, burying herself in work. Meanwhile, the bond between Kevon and Janelle deepened. Conflict loomed on the horizon, but for the moment, both Janelle and Kevon tried to suppress their concerns, convincing themselves that everything was still under control. By November 2014, their relationship had reached a new intensity. While they had not yet crossed physical boundaries, their emotional affair was undeniable. Initially, Janelle had tried to keep professional relations with LaKeisha, but she now viewed her as the primary barrier to her happiness with Kevon. Her thoughts became increasingly fixated on LaKeisha, causing her distress. Each time she saw LaKeisha and Kevon together, jealousy gnawed at her. Janelle started to fixate on the belief that only she could bring true happiness to Kevon. Her feelings for him slowly transformed into an obsession, consuming her thoughts and making it difficult for her to think about anything else. Even at work, Janelle's mind often drifted back to their conversations in those rare moments alone. She began to notice a shift in her attitude toward LaKeisha. Where she had once seen her as a colleague, she now viewed her as a rival who needed to be eliminated. By the end of November, Janelle began to see troubling signs that only heightened her inner turmoil. Her obsession with Kevon started to impact her behavior and work. Despite their growing closeness, Kevon had yet to take any decisive action to end his relationship with LaKeisha. This only intensified Janelle's feelings of jealousy and uncertainty. A pivotal moment occurred during one of their conversations when Kevon casually mentioned that he and LaKeisha were planning to spend the holidays together in an attempt to rekindle their relationship. For Janelle, this news felt like a harsh blow. The idea that LaKeisha might win Kevon back became a genuine obsession for Janelle. She felt increasingly threatened by LaKeisha and began to think that this obstacle needed to be removed. By December 2014, Janelle's inner turmoil had reached its peak. Janelle began to suspect that LaKeisha was aware of her feelings for Kevon. Her paranoia intensified when LaKeisha casually brought up topics like marriage and loyalty during their work conversations. To Janelle, every word from LaKeisha felt like a veiled hint or accusation. These discussions started to feel like threats to Janelle. She became increasingly withdrawn, losing control over her behavior. Her focus during assignments faltered as her mind fixated obsessively on ways to eliminate LaKeisha. Occasionally, Janelle felt as if LaKeisha was watching her with suspicion, as though she could see through all of Janelle's secret thoughts and plans. These moments triggered panic and anxiety, causing Janelle's work performance to deteriorate. The attention to detail Janelle had once prided herself on began to slip, and her colleagues noticed her growing irritability and withdrawal. Every conversation with LaKeisha was tinged with underlying tension. Janelle became increasingly fearful of being exposed. By mid-December, Janelle had nearly fully retreated into a world of paranoia and fear. Each time LaKeisha mentioned Kevon or their future plans, Janelle felt as if she were losing control. Despite lacking concrete evidence, she convinced herself that LaKeisha suspected their connection. Her paranoia peaked when LaKeisha suggested they work together on a minor assignment. Throughout the day, Janelle was overwhelmed by tension, unable to shake the feeling that LaKeisha was scrutinizing her every move. In Janelle's mind, LaKeisha became the enemy, poised to expose her at any moment, making each encounter emotionally exhausting. Janelle's fear of exposure began to transform into the belief that eliminating LaKeisha was the only solution. She started devising ways to use her skills to remove LaKeisha from their lives, convincing herself it was the only way to free Kevon and build a future together. By the end of December 2014, Janelle began to craft a plan. Janelle began devising scenarios where LaKeisha could be removed from their lives. Amidst her growing stress and paranoia, she frequently considered staging an incident that would look like an accident. Her training as a police officer enabled her to evaluate the risks and methods needed to cover up the crime. Janelle began identifying moments when LaKeisha was vulnerable during risky assignments or at times when fewer people were around. She felt she was nearing the point where her plan would be ready for execution. Her obsession with Kevon and her fear of exposure consumed her completely, leaving her unable to stop. By January 2015, LaKeisha had long suspected that something was wrong in her marriage. She was attuned to the subtle changes in her husband's behavior, and Kevon's growing coldness had become increasingly evident over the months. Initially, LaKeisha had attributed this change to the lingering effects of their child's loss. Things worsened after Janelle became LaKeisha's partner. Kevon spent increasing amounts of time away from home, attributing it to work, and an invisible bond seemed to form between him and Janelle, one that LaKeisha could no longer ignore. Rather than confronting them directly, LaKeisha decided to take a more strategic approach. LaKeisha, being both clever and calculated, sensed that her husband and partner were concealing something significant. Choosing not to confront them directly, she decided to play along. LaKeisha kept her suspicions private and began testing Janelle methodically, placing her in uncomfortable and high-pressure work situations to observe her reactions. Sometimes, LaKeisha assigned Janelle minor tasks that forced her to interact under stressful conditions. At other times, she deliberately planned her absences, taking time off or staying late at work, to seemingly give Janelle and Kevon more opportunities to be together. This was all part of her strategy. LaKeisha wanted Janelle to feel comfortable and reveal her true self. By February 2015, LaKeisha was approaching the point where her plan would come to fruition. She began showing trust towards Janelle, deliberately creating situations that made Janelle feel secure, as if LaKeisha suspected nothing. At work, LaKeisha began delegating more important tasks to Janelle, allowing her to take charge of certain investigations independently. This made Janelle believe that LaKeisha trusted her. However, this was all part of LaKeisha's calculated strategy. She wanted Janelle to feel secure and confident that her suspicions were unwarranted. By this time, LaKeisha was preparing her final move. She observed Janelle's odd behavior, nervousness, and frequent avoidance of personal conversations. Additionally, LaKeisha noted that Kevon had increasingly avoided discussions about their marriage's future. All of this confirmed LaKeisha's suspicions, and she was now ready to gather evidence. Meanwhile, Kevon, aware of Janelle's growing obsession, began exploiting her vulnerability for his own benefit. He wasn't honest with either Janelle or LaKeisha and had been playing his own game all along. Kevon recognized that Janelle's feelings for him were deeper than mere infatuation and began to manipulate her emotions accordingly. In March 2015, during one of their secret meetings, he subtly suggested to Janelle that they could be together if it weren't for his marriage to LaKeisha. He portrayed his relationship with LaKeisha as a heavy burden that had long been dragging him down. Kevon claimed that LaKeisha was too absorbed in her work and no longer understood him as a person. These conversations intensified Janelle's obsession, leading her to believe that Kevon genuinely wanted to be with her if only LaKeisha weren't in the way. Kevon was adept at manipulation, skillfully playing on Janelle's emotions. Kevon never spoke directly but always left room for Janelle's imagination. He knew she would go to great lengths for him and subtly encouraged her to think that resolving the LaKeisha problem was within her control. By late March 2015, Janelle was more convinced than ever that Kevon needed her to solve the situation. LaKeisha now appeared as the sole obstacle to their happiness. Janelle's thoughts became consumed with scenarios where LaKeisha was no longer in the picture. She increasingly believed that without LaKeisha, she and Kevon could finally have the perfect life together. Influenced by Kevon's manipulations, Janelle became obsessed with her fantasies. She meticulously planned various ways to remove LaKeisha from their lives, ensuring that no suspicion would fall on her. Despite the growing tension within her, Janelle was convinced that this drastic measure was the only path to the happiness she desired with Kevon. In April 2015, as LaKeisha neared the culmination of her investigation, Janelle's obsession with Kevon intensified. Despite LaKeisha's growing evidence and her strategic moves to uncover the truth, Janelle remained convinced she had everything under control. Her fixation on removing LaKeisha grew more desperate, driving her deeper into dangerous and reckless thoughts. Janelle's growing obsession, fueled by Kevon's manipulations and her jealousy, led her to seriously contemplate murder. By April 2015, her initial doubts had evolved into a concrete plan. Drawing on her extensive police training, she meticulously crafted a scheme to eliminate LaKeisha, ensuring it would appear accidental and leave no trace linking her to the crime. Her careful preparation highlighted her commitment to the plan, driven by a belief that this was the only way to secure her future with Kevon. Janelle meticulously studied LaKeisha's routines, identifying patterns in her schedule and noting moments when she was most vulnerable. She observed which assignments put LaKeisha at risk and assessed how these scenarios could be manipulated to appear as unfortunate accidents. Janelle's goal was to ensure that LaKeisha's death, if it were to occur, would be convincingly framed as a tragic accident, minimizing any suspicion of foul play and protecting Janelle's own involvement. Janelle's plan was to orchestrate an incident during a high-risk operation where LaKeisha would be caught in a dangerous situation. She prepared by identifying an upcoming operation with significant risk and devised a strategy to ensure that LaKeisha would be in the thick of it. Janelle meticulously planned how to manipulate the situation so that it appeared as an unfortunate consequence of the operation, all the while ensuring that her own involvement remained undetectable. Her focus was on making the scene look convincingly accidental to avoid any suspicion. Janelle's obsessive focus on the plan grew stronger as she carefully examined each detail. She reviewed LaKeisha's schedule, identified potential vulnerabilities in the upcoming operation, and considered how she could influence the outcome to ensure that LaKeisha's involvement would lead to a fatal accident. Janelle's meticulous planning included considering how to avoid any trace of her own involvement and ensuring that everything would appear as an unfortunate accident, thus protecting her future with Kevon. The gravity of her actions weighed heavily on her, but her determination to be with Kevon drove her to continue refining her plan. Janelle maintained a facade of normalcy at work, focusing on her tasks and interactions with colleagues, all while her mind was consumed with the intricate details of her plan. She ensured that her behavior remained consistent with her usual professional demeanor to avoid raising any suspicions. Her meticulous study of ballistics and the operation's logistics allowed her to confidently plan how to stage LaKeisha's death as a tragic accident during a high-risk situation. She knew that any deviation from her carefully orchestrated plan could jeopardize everything she had worked for, including her future with Kevon. On April 29, 2015, a high-risk operation involving a suspected drug cartel was scheduled, providing the chaotic environment Janelle had been waiting for. It was the ideal moment for her plan to unfold, as the operation promised a dangerous situation where the focus would be on apprehending the suspects rather than on her actions. Janelle was prepared, knowing that this event would offer the perfect cover for her to execute her plan and ensure LaKeisha's death was perceived as an unfortunate accident in the line of duty. The scene was set for chaos: a crowded street, a potentially volatile situation with armed suspects, and the usual confusion that accompanies such operations. Janelle and LaKeisha, along with their team, arrived at the store, which was now cordoned off by police. The store itself was a small, cramped space, ideal for creating confusion and disorder. As they approached, Janelle mentally prepared for her role in the operation, focusing on the plan she had meticulously crafted. Her objective was clear: to make LaKeisha's death appear as a tragic accident amid the chaotic situation of the robbery. Witnesses reported that the suspect was armed and aggressively threatening the store staff. As Janelle and LaKeisha headed toward the location, Janelle appeared composed, but internally she was increasingly anxious. She saw this situation as her chance to eliminate LaKeisha and was mentally rehearsing the plan she had prepared. On April 30, 2015, Janelle was ready to execute her plan. Before her shift began, she mentally reviewed every detail, meticulously planning her actions. She was confident that the chaos of the shootout would provide the perfect cover to make LaKeisha's death appear accidental, with the fatal shot seemingly coming from her own side. Janelle leveraged her understanding of crime scenes to ensure her plan went off without a hitch. She knew that carrying out the act during a chaotic situation would provide the best cover, as it would be difficult for investigators to pinpoint the shooter in the confusion. On the morning of May 1, 2015, Janelle and LaKeisha were dispatched to another armed suspect incident. The day appeared routine for the department, but for Janelle, it was the result of months of preparation. She had planned to make her move when things reached their peak chaos. As they arrived at the robbery scene, Janelle kept a calm exterior, though her heart was racing inside. This was the moment Janelle had been preparing for. Early on the morning of May 1, 2015, she and LaKeisha responded to a call about an armed robbery at a small grocery store in downtown Denver. The suspect, armed and threatening everyone inside, had created a tense situation. Janelle saw this as her opportunity. Remaining calm on the surface, she mentally braced herself for what she hoped would mark the start of a new chapter. As they neared the store, they were met with a tense standoff. Ballistic analysis and interview results began to reveal inconsistencies with the initial account. Video footage from the scene also suggested that Janelle might have been closer to LaKeisha than she had reported. At this stage, Janelle was still unaware that Internal Affairs was investigating her involvement in the incident. She kept up the facade of the grieving partner, oblivious to the growing suspicion around her. A few weeks after LaKeisha's death in May 2015, a thorough investigation was launched. Initially, it seemed like a tragic accident. LaKeisha had been killed in the shootout, and the suspect, who was also dead, was deemed responsible. However, a detailed review of the ballistic data and video footage from the scene raised some surprising questions. Experts noticed that the trajectory of the bullet that hit LaKeisha didn't align with where the suspect was believed to have been. This raised initial concerns among the investigators, who struggled to explain the inconsistencies. Internal Affairs was soon brought in to review the case and check for any mistakes. Meanwhile, Janelle's colleagues started observing unusual behavior from her after the tragedy. Despite her outward display of grief, Janelle appeared unusually composed and distant for someone who had just lost a partner. Though many knew her as a professional capable of handling emotional trauma, even they found her demeanor strange in this context. In early June 2015, a critical piece of evidence came to light. A recording from a nearby building's surveillance camera provided crucial evidence. The footage revealed Janelle's movements during the shootout, which contradicted her initial statements. It showed her moving around the scene more quickly and closer to LaKeisha than she had admitted. The footage also captured Janelle pausing at a critical moment, when the suspect had already begun shooting, as if she were waiting for something. This evidence marked the beginning of a more thorough investigation. Internal Affairs started to probe why Janelle had behaved this way and what factors might have influenced her actions at that time. By July 2015, the ballistic report validated the investigators' concerns. Analysis of the bullet that hit LaKeisha revealed it had been fired from a much closer range than initially believed. Furthermore, the trajectory indicated that the shot had originated from Janelle's weapon, not the suspect's. Internal Affairs recognized they were dealing with more than just an accident. It could be a case of premeditated murder. With these new findings, they opted to interrogate Janelle more thoroughly, while keeping the full extent of their evidence confidential. Investigators scrutinized her behavior and actions on the day of the incident, increasingly suspecting that Janelle was concealing much more than initially apparent. In August 2015, 3 months after LaKeisha's murder, an official internal investigation into Janelle was initiated. She was called in for questioning and asked to recount the events of that day once more. This time, the questions were more detailed and focused. Investigators concentrated on her movements, using surveillance footage to pinpoint discrepancies between her actions and her initial statements. Janelle began to feel uneasy. She realized the investigators were closing in on the truth, but hoped she could talk her way out of the situation. She attempted to stay confident and stick to her version of events, but small inconsistencies, frequent pauses, and nervous gestures started to reveal her unease. The investigators, however, avoided rushing to conclusions, allowing her more opportunities to slip up. By the end of August 2015, the accumulated evidence was sufficient to file formal charges against Janelle. She was summoned to the station under the guise of discussing new details about the case. When she arrived, 2 internal affairs investigators met her and informed her of the charges related to LaKeisha's murder. Janelle was stunned. She couldn't believe her meticulously crafted plan had unraveled. In that moment, her world came crashing down. Years of service and a hard-earned reputation were shattered in an instant. Confronted with the evidence, ballistic reports, video footage, and inconsistencies in her statements, Janelle understood there was no escaping the situation. Her arrest shocked not only her but also her colleagues, many of whom struggled to believe that someone they had trusted as a dependable and responsible professional could be involved in such a crime.